Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's track guide for the IRO4. We are at Road America for what should be a fun week of close racing. There's a ton of draft here in the IRO4. There are plenty of overtaking opportunities because of that draft. That you'll see a lot of wheel-to-wheel combat this week because of that draft, and you will see the field of cars being more tightly held together because of that draft as well. So if you can keep it smooth here behind a faster car, you can stay with that faster car because of these longer straights. But yeah, like I said, it will produce a lot of closer racing. So be prepared to go wheel to wheel. That said, because you are racing closer together, there is an opportunity for a little bit more incidents. But that said, it still should be a good time provided everyone around you is being respectful. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the lap before we dive into the details corner by corner to figure out how we did it. All right, everyone. And before we check out the track conditions and dive into the details corner by corner, I do just want to say if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so now. It's super helpful for me as I try to grow this YouTube channel. And it's also helpful for you because you'll get notifications about when I come out with more track guides or other videos. I'll also recommend that you check out the description of the video below. There are a bunch of great links, including just a breakdown of the video so that you can go to like a specific corner or a specific section of the video if you're looking for that, a link to this lap on Garage 61 if you're looking to compare your telemetry to my telemetry, a link to my Twitch if you want to come hang out on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/elgato con la pipa. A link to my Discord if you want to join that. A link to the racing league I help run if you want to race in a racing league in the F4 car. And yeah, discount code demoradness.com. But anyway, enough shameless plugs there, enough shilling. Let's go ahead and take a look at the track conditions and then dive into the details corner by corner. Before we get started, let's take a look at our track conditions. We have a 27 degrees Celsius track with 26-degree air temperature and moderately low usage at 41%. I want to note that air temperature is very, very important this week when determining lap times. The lower the air temperature, the more engine power you have, the faster you're going to go down these long straights here. So if this number is higher for you, expect less power, less straight line speed. If this number is lower for you, expect more engine power and more straight line speed. Wind direction will also help us if it's pushing us down any of the long straights, but I'm not sure which wind direction is really ideal. As for our laps, I did a lot of experimentation through these first 9 laps. We did a full tank of fuel, but I would ignore these lap times from, laps 1 through 9. I was messing around with a lot of stuff, wasn't really trying to put the lap together, was trying to really find the limits. That said, I got my stuff together for laps 10 and 11 so we could put together a track guide lap. We're actually going to talk about lap 10, this 208. 541. It's just a little bit more tidy of a lap than the 208 468, even though the 208 468 is a little bit faster. I like to talk about these more tidy laps because, again, we're talking about corner concepts and our approaches there. And so having a little bit cleaner lap makes it easier to talk about those and show you. That said, I will put a video of this lap, the faster lap, the 208 468, at the end of the guide in case you are interested in seeing the differences. The differences are minuscule. But yeah, if you're interested in seeing that little bit faster lap, I will put that at the end of the video. That said, let's go ahead and dive into this 208 541 and talk about what we're doing corner by corner. Turn 1 comes at the end of the long main straight, so we have a lot of speed when we reach it, and it's a fairly quick corner, so our goal here is to really maintain as much of that speed from the main straight through the corner as we can. The key here is keeping the car smooth under braking and turn in and maximizing the amount of track we use to help us in keeping the car smooth. If we're too harsh on the brakes or steering, we'll overload the grip of the tires, so we don't want to do anything too suddenly or too harshly. We can start braking right in between the final set of cones, and we want to complete the peak of our braking while in a straight line. As we turn in, we want to make sure we're releasing the brakes smoothly but fairly quickly to transition the use of grip from slowing to turning. We're aiming for roughly a middle apex, and we want to use as much of the apex curbing as we can. On this particular lap, we leave a little bit on the table, but it's safe and preferable to use every bit of the paved apex curbing. As we get to the curbing, we can start to accelerate, but the main thing here is to keep in mind that we do not want to feel the front tires scrubbing across the track. If they're scrubbing, we're losing grip and we'll risk running wide on exit while also losing some of our momentum. If you run into this problem, try to delay your throttle input a little bit or slow just a touch more on entry. One thing I will note here as well is that I do downshift to fourth on this lap, but on the faster lap I stay in fifth. The time through turn 1 between the two laps is almost identical, so it's really a matter of personal preference and may depend on track conditions, but I feel like I was more consistent using fourth in these conditions. On exit, we once again want to use as much curbing as we can without getting an off track, as we aim to carry as much momentum as we can through the exit and down the hill heading towards the turn 3 braking zone. Turn 3 is another fairly fast corner, and if we did a good job in turn 1, we're going to be carrying a lot of speed when we get there. We're also exiting onto another long straight, so we do want to carry as much of this speed as we can through the corner and onto this second straight, but we need to be careful not to overdo it and run wide on exit, so our focus should be on getting a good, smooth, clean exit. The way we get there is being patient on entry and waiting for the right moment to commit back to throttle. It can be very easy to be a little bit too eager here and get on throttle a little bit too early, or to try to carry too much speed through the corner. If we do, we'll be fast on entry, but lose out on the exit and down the next straight, having to make corrections to avoid driving off the track on exit. We can start braking as we approach the one board and the white line in the road, and similar to turn 1, we want to get the heavy part of the braking done in a straight line so we can stay smooth through the corner. As we turn in, we want to smoothly release the brakes, and we're aiming for as late of an apex as possible and to use all of the curbing as we can while maintaining our momentum. On this lap, we do leave a little bit of margin on the table at the apex, but you can once again safely use all of the curbing there, and that's what we should really aim to do. As we get to the apex, we want to wait for the moment when we know we can make the exit cleanly before we get back to throttle. Once again, it can be very tempting to get on throttle just a little too early, but we have to keep our goals in mind here. The exit tightens, so we have a little bit less room on exit than we're expecting, and we want a strong exit to have a bunch of speed down the straight, which we can use to set up a defense or overtake at the end of it. With that in mind, patience is key, and my advice here is to wait just a moment longer than you initially think you want to get back on throttle before doing so. On exit, there's a large paved runoff area, and we want to use all of that to maximize our exit speed, but get back over to the regular pavement as quickly as possible to avoid ending up in the grass. Turn 5 comes at the end of the long second straight, but unlike our previous braking zones, it's a much harder braking zone and a much slower corner. This is also the key overtaking opportunity on track, so it's worth practicing both the inside and outside lines and learning how each of them work for attacking and defending. As we come to the end of this straight, we want to square ourselves up with a gravel trap on the right side of the track, and we can start braking as we get to the end of it. We want to once again stay in a straight line as we complete our heavy braking, and as we turn in, we'll release the brakes smoothly, looking to take a slightly late apex and dip our left tire onto the apex curbing. On entry, sometimes people will open up the corner a little bit more than I do here and use a ton of the area on the right side. I've just never quite been able to make that work. The apex curbing here has a slight dip that will help pull us through the corner, so we want to try to use all of it but avoid touching the grass. On this lap, we're sticking with the theme of not quite using all the apex as we wanted to, and you can see here that I have to counter steer just a little bit to catch a slide, which causes us to miss the apex slightly. But once again, that little dip at the apex curbing will help pull us through the corner with just a little bit more speed, so we want to use as much of that as we can. On the exit, there's another healthy amount of paved runoff, and we want to maximize our exit by using all of that as we head up the hill towards turn 6. Turn 6 is an interesting one because we're cresting the hill as we slow the car and try to turn in, but cresting the hill will cause the car to get light and induce heavy oversteer or understeer depending on what we're doing with our inputs. If we're too much on the brakes, then the nose of the car will be planted, and as the rear of the car crests the hill, it will cause it to oversteer and step out on us. If we're not on the brakes enough or trying to accelerate as we crest the hill, the fronts won't have enough grip and will get understeer, so we're really looking at a balancing act. With this in mind, we want to once again have our peak braking done in a straight line before we crest the hill, and as we crest the hill and start turning in, we want to start releasing the brakes to keep the car balanced. As we turn in, we're looking to use all of the curbing like I'm finally able to do here at the apex, and on exit, we can use as much of the paved runoff area as necessary, but we don't need to force ourselves out there. One thing to mention here too is that we're flat out from the exit here through the next corner and back down the hill, so we want to prioritize a faster exit to maximize this next flat out run. With that in mind, we take a similar approach to turn 3 and really want to make sure to be patient when getting back on throttle, because any corrections or lifts to avoid running wide on exit will compromise our speed. So as you head towards the apex, once again take a touch longer getting back on throttle than you really kind of initially want to, and make sure the car feels smooth and settled after cresting the hill before you get back on throttle so we can get a nice launch out of turn 6. Turn 7 is easily flat out, you just want to make sure to use all the apex and exit curbing. Turn 8 is pretty similar to turn 5. We have a hard braking zone and a slightly slower corner with a dip at the apex that we want to use to help pull us through the corner. That said, the dip at the apex here is a little bit more dramatic and the apex speed is a little bit higher, so using that dip to pull us through the corner is a little bit more important. We can start braking right as we get to the 2 board, and we want to be patient on turn in, waiting until we can start to spot the exit. Right about the end of the entry curbing, we can start to turn in, and we want to aim to get our left tires into the apex dip to help swoop us through the apex and into the exit. On entry, some people like to use this entry curbing, but in general, I find going out there doesn't really help me so much. As we get into the apex dip, we can start to get back on throttle aggressively, trusting that it will help us complete our rotation through the corner so we don't run wide on exit. On exit, we once again want to use all of the pavement necessary to avoid tire scrub and running out into the grass as we head down towards the famous carousel. Technically, the carousel is two separate corners, so I'll break it down as such because there are also two distinct phases. Turn 9 is the first phase, and for us, we can think about this as fast in and slow out. We're coming in with good speed, and we have a lot of circumference to cover around the carousel, so we can take all of the speed into it without having to think about the exit right away. As we enter turn 9, we want to open up as much as we can before we dive down towards the inside part of the corner. There's a lot of camber to work with here, and the best camber is furthest inside, which means we can run a shorter line through the corner while maintaining good speed by using this camber. Running out wider here, the camber falls away, and it can be very easy to wash out into the gravel. As we settle into the corner, we'll start to feel the car begin to wash out ever so slightly, and at this point we want to start lifting slightly to keep the car in the lower, tighter part of the corner so we can continue to maximize our use of this camber and minimize the distance we travel. This lift is what's going to set us up for the second phase of the corner in turn 10 as we start to focus on exit. For the second phase, we have to begin to think about the exit. The exit here is very important because it leads onto another super fast flat out section of track. When we lift to keep the car in the camber, we want to wait for the car to settle and start to dig back into the corner, and as it does that, we can get back to throttle aggressively. We want to stay in this tight line because we're once again maximizing the camber at the inside part of the track. As the late apex curbing comes into sight, we want to aim to meet up with that curbing, but we don't really need to use a lot of it. And as we meet up with the curbing, we can start to open up our hands and let the car run out to the exit curbing to allow the car to build up speed and momentum. Being smooth through turn 9 was important to help us get into the camber, but being smooth through turn 10 is even more important because it allows us to build up speed and momentum for the long upcoming straight. With that in mind, our goal here is to have a very planted and settled car through this later part of the carousel and to really make sure we're dug into that camber so we can use it to slingshot us out of the corner and down this long straight. Turn 11 is this flat out kink where you want to make sure to use all of the curbing available to keep the car smooth. Canada corner or turn 12 is another key overtaking and defending corner. We're finishing this long flat out section and we have a pretty heavy braking zone with a fair amount of room, so expect to be too wide here often. That said, the exit here can still be pretty quick because we have a large amount of runoff to use and we can use this quick exit in our flat out run to the final corner, so we're actually going to prioritize the exit slightly. Trying to be too aggressive on entry here can often lead to tears, so I find focusing our efforts on exit is the most consistent way to find speed here, and it makes the final sector way more manageable. We can start braking right around the 3 board, and we once again want to get all of our heavy braking done in a straight line. As we reach the 1 board, we can start turning in for the corner, and we want to use as much apex curb as we can get away with to help leave us with as much room on exit as possible. Similar to previous corners, we once again need to be patient as we head into the apex and trail off the brakes, because getting on throttle too early here is easy to do, and it ends up with us in the gravel or even worse, in the wall. So, my advice here, once again, is to wait a little bit longer than you think you should before committing back to throttle. I know I keep repeating myself about this, but oftentimes tracks have repeating themes, and this is just one of them. Once we're confident we can stay on track on exit, we can get back on throttle and plan to use all of the paved runoff area to keep our momentum up on exit, careful to avoid touching the gravel or grass as we do so. Turn 13 is easily flat out, so once again, just aim to use all of the entry and apex curbing. Turn 14 is maybe the most important corner on track, and certainly the most important exit. A good exit here can be the difference between winning or losing the race at the line, so we're 100% focused on a good exit. That said, this corner isn't a slow one, and similar to other corners here, it's very tempting to take in too much entry speed or get on throttle too early, so guess what? Our theme about being patient to get back on throttle applies here as well. Turn 14 is also tricky because we're starting to turn in an arc towards the apex as we start braking, so we need to be careful not to be too harsh on the brakes, or it can be very easy to overload the fronts and cause a lockup or understeer. Because we're looking for a good exit, we also are looking for a slightly later apex, and to use all of the available exit curbing to maximize our run out of the corner. We'll start to break in and arc towards the apex as we get to the white line at the end of the darker tarmac, and we want to trail off the brakes pretty steadily after we get on them. We want to keep our attention at the apex from this point forward because we're waiting to fully commit to turn in and throttle. As the apex comes more into sight and we can spot our later apex, we'll turn in more aggressively towards it and continue to bleed off the brakes. If we've set ourselves up on a good path and the car is rotating well towards the later apex, we can start to smoothly get back on throttle as we start to meet up with the apex curbing. Once again, we want to use all of the apex curbing, and I do once again leave more time on the table by not doing so. I probably should have waited just a touch longer to get back on throttle. Remember, patience. On exit, we want to use all of the exit curbing, but absolutely no more than that. The grass and dirt just off of the curbing is super bumpy and can cause us a lot of problems, so we really want to avoid touching the grass at all costs. Once again, I want to highlight how important the exit here is. If you get a good run here, you can beat the car ahead of you to the line at the end of the race. A bad run here, and the car behind you can beat you to the line. This also sets us up for turn 1 overtakes, so really focus on nailing this exit to maximize your lap times and your race position. All right, everyone. And before we go, I just want to say thanks again so much for watching. Thank you for the feedback, the suggestions, the comments, the subscriptions, hanging out with me on Twitch, joining the Discord, all that kind of stuff. It's great to hear from you, to see all of you, and to know that these track guides are helping you out. So, yeah, please continue just to give me that feedback. I want to improve these and make these as useful and as enjoyable for you as possible. Like I said at the top of the video, I think the racing this week will be great as long as you're around people who are showing respect and leaving you space on the racetrack. It will be very tight racing, so you will have to be a little bit assertive at times to go for those overtakes. Be a little feisty in your defense, but that's okay. As long as you do it respectfully, it should be a great week of racing. I hope you enjoy it, and until I see you next time, please take care of yourselves.